Hey folks, I'm reading a book. Um, so I'm gonna put the phone down so I can read the book. I have a lot of friends with the last name Kennedy, but this book is written by John F. Kennedy. Here we go. Introduction. My name is David Keith Quigley. I did not ask for that name. It was given to me by federal agents after my father, President John F. Kennedy, was assassinated, and I was put in the Witness Protection Program. But what people don't know is that the murders didn't stop with him. My mother, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, and her husband, my stepfather, Aristotle Onassis, were murdered in 1975. My mother was replaced with a body double who wore oversized, dark sunglasses to disguise her appearance. My sister, Carolyn Kennedy, was, I believe, murdered and replaced early in her life. I can't remember seeing my real sister after she was between the ages of 10 and 12. What happened to her is a mystery and deserves its own book, but I will do my best to relate my memories of Caroline in these pages. The man the world knew as John Kennedy Jr. was my body double. He showed up at my school when I was 9. And sat next to me in class. I was John and he was called John John. The mafia loves nicknames like that. Scarface, Joe Bananas, Jackie Nose, and John John. The nickname is a moniker that describes their identifying characteristics, in this case that he was the double. If you look at photographs of me in the White House, you will see that I have detached earlobes and a pug nose. The man who replaced me had he said he had detached earlobes. The man who replaced me had attached earlobes and a sharp nose. And yes, he is dead. I personally saw his lifeless, bloated body after his plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean in 1999. If someone were to appear on the public stage, declare himself to be John Kennedy Jr., and tell the world that he faked his death, that person would be another body double. Our government is a murder-crime ring whose modus operandi is identity theft. That's how the mafia works. They are like hermit crabs crawling into the shells of their deceased fellow beings to take over their identities, launder billions of dollars, and gain total control over humanity. All of these murders were committed to steal the fortunes of the Kennedy and Onassis families. The actions and attitudes of those who committed these heinous acts go beyond evil and greed. They exist in a world of crazy that ordinary people would struggle to comprehend. It has its own language, culture, and code of conduct. For most of my life, I was a kite in the ferocious storm of that crazy. Somehow, someone down below had a grip on the end of the string, and so I am still here, alive to tell my story. My life has been a living hell. I've been tortured, abused, and kept in poverty to prevent me from sharing the truth. Along the way, there have been individuals and organizations like the Hells Angels who risked and sometimes gave their lives to protect me. I will forever be grateful to my brothers, the Hells Angels, for what they sacrificed to protect the life of the son of a murdered president. They are not the criminals Bill Clinton declared them to be, but rather a justice league and need to be recognized as such. Let me stop there because that's the impression I had of them as a teenager and everything else. That's the impression I had, and I know other things happened. And the man I lived with for 10 years who recently passed away, he also, when he escaped from the situation he grew up in Germany, which I haven't talked about, he had to disguise himself. He came from a CIA family, and they forced him to come to America and hide out, bleach, dye their hair, bleach it, change their appearance. And he escaped under Jesuit threat, don't tell anyone anything. He's dead now, but I know a lot of things he wasn't supposed to tell, and the poor man was terrified until he died about what he had already talked about and ostracized. So whatever Mr. Kennedy says in this book, it's the hard thing to believe for most people is how normal this is. in some people's lives, that alone. But I have to speak up because, because I've been witness to it and part of a family that was, a different caliber of the same fucking shit. Okay, sorry. Let me keep reading. I am also grateful to the rogue government agents who perceived what was happening as evil and disregarded orders, risking their lives and careers to save me. There are some good guys out there, but they are not organized. They are individuals with a soul and a conscience which is illuminated like the strike of a match when they brush up against aberrant happenings. And I will forever be thankful to a man I knew only as Wayne, a protecting angel who was always present to save, shield, and guide me through the awful reality of my life. I never knew precisely who Wayne was, except that he was a powerful man with connections to the highest levels of government, the entertainment industry, and the underworld. Once, when an agent asked Wayne how to cause someone to forget things, he replied, torture. I've been tortured many times, and as a result, there are gaps in my memory, and it is difficult for me to remember names and dates. There was also the total confusion of being ferried between lives with the Kennedys, the Quigleys, the Hells Angels, and many other locations around the world where I was sent for periods of time. I am, therefore, presenting my story as best I can as anecdotes, episodes, and short narratives, each about a different time in my life. Sometimes people ask me, if you're JFK, how could you still be alive? As if to imply that I'm lying or perhaps suggest that they wished I were. That hurts my feelings because I think, thank God I am. It is essential that I live long enough to tell this story because our country's in danger and it terrifies me. It should terrify you. By the time you reach the end of this book, you will understand, and once you understand, you must act. Don't sit back. Don't trust the plan. The plan is not for your well-being. Okay. 7 minutes. Okay, book 1. Loss, Abuse, and MK Ultra. And I just have to comment that the fact that he's saying so much about MK Ultra, it's just wonderful. That wonderful meaning that he's the best. Anyway, it brings it all together in front of this particular individual, how real this stuff is. So those of us that have been speaking out about, my mother in Camarillo State Hospital and this and that and the other, all people have been talked about MK Ultra. It is very, very real. And there's no other way that, they all use it. They all use it. They've all allowed it, and they keep using it. Okay, sorry. So, shattered innocence. I have only a few memories of that time in American history that shine like a buried moon in the mind of every citizen. I was born 2 weeks after my father, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, was elected president, and I was 3 years old when he was murdered. This is what I remember from those early years. I remember colors. I remember sitting in a red upholstered sports car and being so taken by the color. I remember being on a golf course and my father walking ahead of me. My focus was on the grass, which was so green. All I could think was, wow, look at this grass. I remember watching my father getting ready to give a speech and being captivated by a woman with a wand-like device, steaming the wrinkles out of his suit. The next thing I knew, he was gone, and I ran around looking for him. When I found him, he was in the middle of giving his speech. And I recall being with him in a car, just the two of us. He was frustrated and upset and pounded the steering wheel as he reprimanded himself. He said, "Oh shit, they're going to kill me. They are absolutely going to kill me." But when he got out of the car, there were people there, and he was as calm as day. The day my father was shot, I was in my bedroom at the White House. I remember the toys on the floor and the colorful pictures on the walls. Some Secret Service agents entered and told me my father was dead. I looked at them confused. Dead? What's dead? After that, they had me practice saluting over and over. I did that for hours. On the day of the funeral, Bobby Kennedy stood behind me and gave me a little nudge, the prearranged signal for me to step forward and salute as my father's coffin passed. The Secret Service agents also told me to pick out my favorite toy and put on my father's casket at the funeral. I got my toy airplane on a string and brought it with me. But on the day of the funeral, they took it away and handed me a PT-109 boat, a model of the one my father was on when a Japanese destroyer struck it during World War II. They put my plane on the ground, or someone stole it, but I couldn't find it afterward. I felt upset about that, but then I was distracted by a man dressed in a colorful kilt with bagpipes and adorned with shiny medals. I thought he was a clown and asked my mother if I could go over to him. That's all I remember from that day. My memories of life after my father's death are scattered leaves. They are the fallouts of multiple explosions. I will try to relate them to you in the following pages. As you read, I believe you will understand why it was difficult for me to formulate a cohesive timeline and know my age when particular events happened. Much of that is related to the fact that I was a victim of MK Ultra, known then as Project Artichoke. I often did not know how I got to a particular place and felt restricted in terms of what I could say or ask. I refer to these experiences as being under. Another factor that adds to my confusion is that after being placed in witness protection, I was given a new birthday, 6 years younger than my actual age, a new name, and was even made to stop being left-handed. The Quigleys, my new family, bleached my hair and had me take a cocktail of hormone pills every morning. The torture and evil I experienced while in their care shattered my mind and stole my innocence. I went from being loved and protected to being assaulted and abused as quickly as the bang from a burst balloon. Okay. Next chapter, Quigley Life. If I remember from ages 3 to 5, all I remember from ages 3 to 5 is flying around the world and staying at different places for periods. Some of the people were nice and some were not so nice. Some of them seemed worried that I was even there. Then when I was 5, I was dropped off at what looked like an old 2-story white house that had been converted into a school. Downstairs there were classrooms, and I remember having to sign my name in a register. Upstairs were more rooms, and one of them had a bed. They told me it was my room and I should sleep. Then, after I fell asleep, a creepy man came in, pulled down my pajamas, and raped me. I felt a burning, stabbing pain and wept. Afterwards, he slapped me on the back of my head for getting blood on his genitals and told me to shut up and never say a word about it. But when I was picked up by a couple whose names I don't recall, I said, "My butt hurts, it really hurts." The man said, "Forget it, kid, that's the way it goes." I'm going to just comment in here that my friend who I stayed with when he was raised in Germany by those Jesuits, his mother, he was being raped by the Jesuit priests since he was 5 and 6 in their boys' home in Rudesheim, Germany. And his mother was a nurse, professional nurse, so he started going home at the age of 5 and saying the exact same thing. "My popo hurts." He told her, is what he told me, he told her a lot and she just ignored him. Never did anything. during the whole time and just went along with the church agenda. And by the time I met him and he was 60, he had lost his intestines, he had lost his ability to poop, he had a constant wound on his back. I mean, you know, it's not a joke when they do this to kids. There's not too many men that grow up out of that and don't have, medical issues or whatever. But that's how serious it is. When a child says their butt hurts and there's blood, you better check it out, parents. Okay, sorry, but I just have to say that because if and when I tell his story, that's part of it. Which is what, living with someone who survived that and other things I haven't mentioned firsthand, and then being his caregiver for all the times he self-injures so bad, he almost kills himself over and over, and the more love we had, the more he would self-injure. And I do say love, because I kept him off the streets, I kept him away from the parties, I kept him away from all the other pimpy friends he had. And all he wanted to do was live a little bit of a normal life, so we stayed home like we was married, And I kept him out of the nursing home when he almost died. He almost died several times while I knew him. Okay, anyway, sorry. The man said, "Forget it, kid, that's the way it goes." Okay, the woman gasped and said with alarm, "I'm not going for this. This is nonsense." He raised a shoulder, shook his head dismissively, and told her, "That's how it is. That's how we teach them." His chilling words swirled around me like stinging hail pellets, but I understood that the woman was appalled and wanted to protect me. Before I entered the witness protection program, I was about 5 years old, sitting on the cream-carpeted floor of a living room, idly rolling a truck back and forth as some adults chatted. My ears perked up when I heard my name. They were... I go in the sun. They were talking about owning me, buying and selling me. On one side of the coffee table there were Kennedys, but I didn't know who the other people were. After the conversation, Wayne strode into the room. Short, muscular, and bullish, but with the distinctive Kennedy bearing, Wayne emanated power and intelligence. He lifted his chin and said to them, "You own this kid?" A man nodded and said, "Yeah, I own him." And Wayne said, "Well, I want to buy him from you." I will always remember that. Own me? What did that mean? How can you own someone? I didn't understand it, but after that day, Wayne was a constant in my life. He had a particular interest in me, and I remember that at the age of 10, he brought me to a cereal factory in Pennsylvania, owned by the Kennedy family. Inside were old brick buildings with a train track running through the middle of the complex. They had recently done some landscaping, covering the ground of a rest area encircled by benches with white pebbles. As we sat on a bench looking around, Wayne picked up a small black rock and tossed it into the middle of the white ones. Turning to me, he said, "That's you. You're that black rock. You stand out from everybody." At age 5, I was made to live with a family named Quigley. They lived in a large ranch house with a big yard, a chicken coop, houses, and a hog pen in Clovis, California. That's where the government changed my name to David Keith Quigley. From this point on, my memories are like broken fragments of smashed china. So many traumatic things happened that broke my mind. My life was divided between my time with the Quigleys, sojourns with my mother, Jackie, to different locations around the world, time spent in New York City, where I attended school on and off, life on the Greek island of Scorpios, and the yacht, the Christina, with the Onassis, and journeys and black ops with Wayne. These are the shards of memories of my time with the Quigleys. They can be assembled as a mosaic to form an image of what it was like to live there. Max Quigley was a big square man with thin dark hair who looked like an extra in a cowboy western. Dorothy was more Irish-looking with blue eyes and curly red hair. Her usual blank expression hid a dark and poisonous personality. Max and Dorothy had 3 children, Max Jr., Richard, and Deborah. Anyone would take them for a typical church-going family. No one would guess the truth that they were involved in organized crime, child trafficking, and kidnapping. I remember being around 5 years old, and my new brother Richard said he was going to visit his friend Nathan, who lived down the street. I wanted to come along, so I ran after him. When we got to Nathan's, they tied me to a lamppost by my arms and feet and left me hanging there for a long time, crying and screaming. Finally, Max and Dorothy showed up to untie me. Then when we got home, Dorothy took me into my bedroom and beat me with a 2x4 for allowing myself to get tied to a lamppost by my brother. In the early days, the Quigleys managed a restaurant, but they were fired for stealing, so Max went to work at a poultry farm. Not long after that, Max stopped feeding the hogs for a few days, starving them for when the bodies showed up. I don't know who they were, possibly the people who fired them, but the hogs devoured them in minutes. There was nothing left. That week, my new grandmother, Marie Quigley, showed me how to kill a chicken when she chopped its head off on a butcher block in the backyard. Though its head was gone, it ran off, splattering blood and a broken, jagged line across the newly painted white fence. Every morning I was made to take a handful of pills with breakfast. The Quigleys told me it was a vitamin regime, but I suspect they were hormone pills to keep me looking younger. For years I didn't have a birthday. I was just a little kid and had to watch my new siblings have birthday celebrations every year, but there was never one for me. After some years, they gave me a new birthday, January 15, 1966, 6 years younger than my actual age. It wasn't difficult to pull off this deception. I was away from home so often and missed so much school that no one really knew me. When I was home, if I didn't want to go to school, Dorothy didn't care. She let me stay home and watch TV. Also, we lived in a closed community, and everyone was either a member or connected to the same secret society. Crazy happenings were part of everyday life. Whenever I hear closed community, I know some, and then I'm thinking of Kylie Rodney's scenario up in Truckee. Okay, so anyway, the Quigleys also did everything they could to disguise my identity, including putting lemon juice in my hair and making me stand out in the sun to lighten it. I have to stop here because Kenny, the person I'm talking about that I lived with, this is the second person I heard talk about lemon juice, but he's talking about it in this way. Now, Kenny told me that he always told me to lighten his grandmother taught him to lighten his hair using lemon juice. Okay, let's try it, but it happened to him too. Anyway, and so here John is saying that they made him stand out in the sun to lighten it. Lemon juice. It's very interesting. How come they didn't just get bleach or whatever? Okay, anyway, I was left-handed as a child, but even that could have been an identifying characteristic. So every time I put out my left hand to reach for something, Max or Dorothy slapped it. Finally, I learned to use my right hand. Occasionally, the Quigleys brought me to public places where Jackie or some other family members could see me but not speak to me, to ensure my safety. Once when we were at Barnum and Bailey's circus and Jackie was seated a few places down from us. Another time they took me to a Denny's restaurant and she was sitting with some people a few booths away. I wanted to approach her, but the Quigleys told me, "Just shut up and eat your food, kid." They called him Kid a lot, and y'all know which book is called Kid by the Side of the Road. All right, anyway, after a few years in Cisco, we moved to Fresno, and finally, Isn't that funny? He calls it Cisco. San Francisco. We finally moved to Fresno and finally settled in the community of Yosemite Lakes in Coarse Gold, California. This, too, is a closed community consisting of ranch houses spread out from one another at considerable distances. All the families had the Masonic Bible in their homes and were members of secret societies. In the middle of the night, they used to put up a tent on the grounds of somebody's 1,000-acre ranch and conduct Masonic rituals. We were told to refer to one another as brother and sister, perhaps to give us a sense that we were all part of the same family, and possibly so that in later years we wouldn't remember each other's names. As children, they taught us how to make tea lights for these backyard rituals. That's where you poke holes with a can opener around the side of a can and put a candle in it. That way the light only shines down when you hang it up. Even an aircraft flying overhead wouldn't be able to see anything. We would attend these meetings as young kids, and someone would preach, "Your job is to go kill, steal, and bring me money." A girl I was close to told me she was gang raped at one of those ceremonies. Terrible things happened there. I was present for some of them. I remember being drugged out in the middle of the night and put on a stump under a tree with a noose around my neck. Someone kicked the stump out, and I thought I would die, but the rope wasn't tied to the tree. Other times, they had me lie on a table, and they got out a ceremonial knife. All the adults would take turns walking by, acting like they were going to stab me. During these rituals, there was always someone there to make sure no one went crazy and actually did it. But incidents like that mess with my mind. Another time they took me to the graveyard, made me pull up weeds, and told me those were my parents' graves, and I killed them. I also remember a frightening incident from when I was very young, and the Quigleys had a child in the house. I was in my room and couldn't stop crying because I could hear them doing something terrible to this child. Dorothy came in and beat me, which just made me cry more. The next day, Max took something out in a trash bag. To this day, I don't know what happened, but I remember Dorothy used to buy vaporizers. I learned that spraying mist in the air helps a person see the spirit leave the body when someone dies. Shoot, I grew up with vaporizers in my bedroom. Okay, these people would try and capture that. It gave them power somehow. I don't know how. Once, the Quigleys brought over 2 little girls under 5 years old and casually said, "These are your cousins." They introduced them as Heidi and Jeanette, claiming they were Dorothy's brother Richard Crisp's children, but I had never seen them before. They popped out of nowhere. I recall once when we were at their place, I was pushing them around in a wheelbarrow. Looking back, it's clear that those kids were victims of child kidnapping and trafficking, but they appeared unaware of what was happening and didn't grasp that they wouldn't return home. Years later, in the 90s, Richard's ex-wife, Anita, broke down and cried before me, saying, "I'm so sorry they've done this to you." What struck me about Anita was that she looked so much like my mother, Jackie, and I wondered if she had played the part of one of Jackie's doubles. Once I met John Gotti getting off a plane that had just landed on a dirt runway near a cow field in O'Neill, California. Those guys flew back and forth all the time. They liked to have sex with lots of women and get them pregnant to have a big family. He flew in one night when I and a bunch of other kids were gathered in a big tent for a worship ceremony. Gotti was talking about going to some girl's house and screwing her. I knew this girl. She was living with handlers like me and the Quigleys. I said, "You're not going to screw my sister in the middle of the night." The guy with him shoved me on the ground and said, "You need to show this man a little respect." Years later, I couldn't believe it when an HBO special made John Gotti look like some hero. He was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of people, and the only reason he was the Teflon Don, where charges never stuck, was because he was also a government agent. But in the end, I guess he went too far and his family gave him up. A point of confusion is where organized crime ends and the government begins. What is above them? I don't have the answer to all these questions. I wish I did, but I can only present my knowledge and experiences. Our government is an organized crime unit. Organized crime families like the mafia are connected to the government. Secret societies, child trafficking, and human sacrifice rituals are all a part of it and connected to this nefarious jigsaw puzzle of the Garden of Hell. My world was so crazy and confusing that I could never make sense of it. People wanted to kill me, yet they couldn't, somehow. You could call it divine intervention or a combination of seen and unseen forces, but I can't even count the number of attempts made on my life. For example, I rode motorbikes my whole life. I even rode my bike 2 miles to the bus stop when I went to school. One day I was driving my motorbike down a dirt road and coming up on a bend where the road snaked around a river. I tried my brakes, but they didn't work, so I started downshifting, almost crashing into a tree in front of the river. But the tree didn't kill me, and I didn't end up in the river. Somehow I managed to turn up on the road where a house was on the corner. I saw my friend, a high schooler who lived there, and a younger kid standing in the front yard laughing at me. I looked at them shocked, then got off my bike to check the brakes and saw they had been loosened. It was just a funny joke, one shouted through cupped palms. My heart still pounded like crazy from the close call, and I said, I thought you guys were my friends. They could have killed me. They very nearly did, but shortly after that, the older kid who loosened the brakes joined the military. I asked about him and was told that somehow, when he was in training, he fell out of a helicopter to his death. Max and Dorothy Quigley were crooks through and through. As a youngster, I went stream fishing with Max up the hills near Shaver Lake at a place called Dinky Creek. On the way, we would stop off at an old sawmill. Bikers would pull up, and Max would give them a paper shopping bag. I was curious the first time that happened and went over to see what was in there. Before Max could stop me, I saw the plastic sacks filled with white powder like confectioner's sugar. Max was also a counterfeiter and printed $100 bills on a counterfeiting machine in the attic. I remember watching the bills tossed around in the dryer with poker chips so the bits of color would rub off on them and make them look more authentic. Once, we went on a road trip and were violently ill after getting a meal at A&W, only we couldn't go back and complain since we'd paid with a counterfeit 100. Presidential books and commemorative magazines often contain codes for clued-in readers to interpret. An example is a photograph and accompanying caption featured in the JFK Jr. commemorative issue of Life magazine in 1999. John F. Kennedy Jr., an album of unseen and unforgettable pictures. It includes an allusion to Max Quigley and his counterfeit hundreds, probably a source of ridicule within the mafia. Nestled between collection of artistic professional photographs and an obscure blurry picture taken in Greece by an unseen photographer with a telephoto lens, it is of Aristotle, John, and an unidentified friend, me. The caption beneath is bizarre and cryptic, stating that art could be very generous and, on one occasion, gave John 2 crisp $100 bills to buy fishing bait. Decoded, that message could be interpreted as follows. Crisp refers to the Crisp family. Dorothy's maiden name was Crisp, and the message implies that the boy in the photo was hiding with them. Max counterfeited $100 bills if the knowledgeable reader wanted to know which Crisp family member was being referred to as fishing bait, means bait and switch. In other words, the 2 boys in the photograph had their identities switched. And again, for people that are hearing this for the first time that have not studied the Masonic anything, Jessie Saboter is a really good person to learn from. I know it takes hours to listen to what she has to say, but I did make a playlist with a lot of her videos in it, and many of us have learned a lot of things, just how this whole scene works. which I think is probably a prerequisite to being able to even comprehend that this story could be true. Okay. Dorothy got her real estate license and was as crooked as they come. She got involved in a scheme to flip properties after getting them falsely appraised for a higher price than what they were worth. Then she helped buyers get falsified income records to get mortgages on the land they purchased at the inflated price. They're doing this in Arizona right now. Okay, anyway, before she went to trial, the Quigleys paid someone to be her body double. A fake Dorothy Quigley was convicted and sentenced to prison. Then they got rid of the double before she was scheduled to serve her sentence. You know, you guys, every movie that comes out of Hollywood for decades has a gun in the fucking picture. I used to walk in the Blockbuster store, and every movie had someone with a gun. All the movies that you've seen, the gangster, all movies involve what? Murder. All these things are talking. Do you think these movies are just created and no one lives that way? Okay, the attempts on my life by the Quigleys started in earnest after Dorothy's sister, Opal May Edwards, promised me her fortune. Despite her wealth, Opal May was an eccentric millionaire and had quirky habits, probably due to living through the Depression. By the way, when there's a photo, I'll flash the photo. This is from Life magazine. Me, John, and Art in Greece. The caption read, "On another occasion, Onassis handed over 2 crisp $100 bills to buy bait for a fishing trip." So, if you're this age and all this shit's going on around you, people want proof of this story, you know, and they're doing this to children. I'm sure these children kept diaries. I get so mad when people say, "Hey man, proof." You're going to have to take the word of people and sense the truth, because what do you think these criminals do? They hide every possible way they can. Where are you going to get proof? So dumb. One time she bought me a pickup truck that cost $1,200, and when she went to pay for it, she just popped open the glove compartment box and took out a stack of hundreds. Shortly after her husband Darrell died, I found myself in the Quigley's garage with Opal May. I always suspected... I always suspected Darrell's involvement in my father's death. The mafia made you rich if you had anything to do with the Kennedy assassination. While tinkering with my bike, Opal May leaned against a work table, pursed her lips, and spoke to me in a voice full of purpose. She said, "I want you to remember my name. There's some funny business going on here. My name is Opal May Edwards. I left you enough so you'll never have to worry about money again. And if you ever have a child, your child will never have to worry about money. Please remember my name." Opal May disappeared after that. I never saw her again, or her money either. But the Quigleys got wind of the whole thing, and after that they tried to kill me over and over again. Years later I tracked down her grave in Colorado and talked to the groundskeeper there. He said he remembered that funeral well because no one showed up. That didn't sound right to me. Dorothy Quigley would not have missed her sister's funeral. I never had the money to pursue an investigation, so I remained in the dark about Opal May's fate and the millions of dollars she left behind. I know Max Quigley used to try and forge papers in her name, and it's possible the body in that grave in Colorado is not Opal May, but I'll never know for sure. Once I asked Wayne about it, and if he thought I would ever see the money. He shook his head decisively and said, "That book is closed." Confused, I asked what book. Wayne clenched his jaw in frustration and said angrily, "Those Quigleys didn't teach you shit. I paid them all that money to teach you." I thought the book reference must be related to something I often witnessed during the peculiar ceremonies in the middle of the night. under a big tent, they'd take out a giant-sized book, and a designated writer would record the narrative they were crafting, detailing their plan. They would make up a story of what they were going to do and how they would do it. The written scenarios were like blueprints for how these plans would be executed. For example, they might pick out someone who's a billionaire like Donald Trump, and they'd create a scenario in a book about how they would steal his money. Then they would carry out that plan. Another thing that happened at these big family meetings was that we would be made to look at a movie screen while names of prominent people, some dead, would scroll like credits. We were forbidden to speak about the names of people who had passed. Also at these meetings, if someone made a negative comment or a clever remark, someone else would grab them, whisk them off, and they'd never be seen again. I don't know if Wayne knew how the Quigleys were treating me, but I do remember once during winter, Max and Dorothy were visibly nervous, muttering things like, "They're going to kill us." I was just a little kid then, but they dropped me off at Big Bear, California church camp. Snow was on the ground, and a stream ran through the middle of the campgrounds. While I was there, camp counselors taught me how to do trick riding on a horse. They took pictures of me doing things like standing up on the saddle, and I felt like they knew I was John Kennedy Jr., and they were documenting all this for some purpose. They also had me do something called the polar bear, where I dove into icy water and held onto a rock while they timed me to see how long I could hold my breath underwater. The Quigleys were also meant to be camping there, but they changed their plans at the last minute. On visiting days, they never showed up. I sat at a picnic table by myself and waited, but no one came. In the 1970s, people were hearing about chip implants for pets. Let me repeat that. In the 1970s, people were hearing about chip implants for pets so that they could locate their lost animals. However, the capabilities of these chips far exceeded what the public was told, and the technology had existed much longer. Those chips weren't just implanted in pets either. 70s. Around the age of 10, the Quigleys took me on a cross-country journey to a naval base near Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. This base included a once lavish two-story hotel and spa frequented by the wealthy in the 1800s who came to take mineral baths. During World War II, it was repurposed by the Navy into a manufacturing plant, and by the 70s, it was pretty run down. Max and Dorothy dropped me off there, and I was taken upstairs to a room converted into a doctor's office. In the room, a nurse who looked to be in her 50s and an eerie-looking doctor, likely in his 70s, were waiting for me. The nurse instructed me to sit in a chair similar to a dentist's, and they shaved off a section of my hair. I heard a whirring sound and felt some pressure, but no pain. They carefully cut a small round disc from my skull and placed it beside me on a stainless steel tray. Seeing a perfect circle of my skull left me completely shocked. After some procedure, they delicately inserted the cut piece back into my head and bandaged it. Then they attached wires to my head and showed me a picture of a boy who had been kidnapped. The doctor told me to use my third eye to find this kid. Images of blood, gore, and body parts flooded my mind. I screamed and ripped the wires off. "What are you doing to me?" I yelled. They ignored me, wrapped a cloth bandage around my head, and then the nurse brought me downstairs. All the way back to California, I wore that rag around my head and fought back images of hacked-up body parts. Following that incident, I found myself entangled in the world of MKUltra and Project Artichoke. These experiences included instances of lost time, nocturnal abductions to various locations, and surreal occurrences. I will describe a few of these experiences and why they are significant. Okay, that's all for today.